Hello guys, welcome back to the Coin Riches channel. Before we begin, if you collect coins, banknotes, or even old things sitting quietly in a drawer, make sure you subscribe right now because the stories we uncover here are not just about money, they're about time, patience, and the hidden value most people walk past every day. Now let me ask you something very simple and very important. Do you have old coins or banknotes somewhere in your home, a jar on a shelf, a box you haven't opened in years, something your father kept, something your grandfather never threw away? That if the answer is yes, stay with me, because one small coin, made more than 50 years ago, has been silently rewriting history while the world wasn't paying attention. Most people don't remember coins, they remember moments, they remember paydays, grocery counters, bus fares, school lunches. Coins were just noise, dropped, forgotten, ignored. And that's exactly how powerful coins are born. In 1971, Britain went through one of the biggest changes in its monetary history. The old system, pounds, shillings, and pence, disappeared almost overnight. A new system arrived, decimal currency, and with it came a coin that nobody respected, nobody collected, nobody protected. The new pence 2p coin. It wasn't shiny like gold. It wasn't large like a crown. It wasn't special, at least, that's what everyone believed. People spent it without thinking, children lost it, shopkeepers tossed it into drawers, millions were minted, and millions were ignored. But history has a habit of hiding its secrets in plain sight. The year was 1971. Queen Elizabeth II was still young in her reign. Britain was modernizing, rushing forward, letting go of the old world. Factories were loud, cities were changing, people were focused on tomorrow, not on what they were holding in their hands. That first new pence 2p coin carried something different, something subtle, something that only time could expose. The design looked simple, the Queen's portrait, calm and composed, facing forward as always. On the reverse, the feathers of the Prince of Wales, a symbol older than many nations. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, and yet, something about this coin refused to fade. Collectors today will tell you this: the most dangerous coins are not the rare-looking ones, they are the common-looking ones that survived untouched, because survival is not random. Most 1971 new pence 2p coins were used, scratched, damaged, destroyed by everyday life. Only a tiny fraction escaped that fate. Some were saved accidentally, some were forgotten in sealed bags, some were put away by people who trusted their instincts instead of logic. Those people were laughed at. Why keep a 2p coin? Why save something worth almost nothing? But time doesn't reward logic. It rewards patience. As years passed, Britain quietly changed the wording on its coins. New pence didn't last forever, designs evolved, portraits changed, metals shifted, and suddenly, that first year 2p coin became a marker in time. A fingerprint of a nation's transition. A moment frozen in copper. To the untrained eye, it still looks ordinary, and that's the trap, because rarity is not about how many were made. It's about how many survived, in the right condition, untouched, uncleaned, unaltered. Most people clean old coins, they polish them, they destroy their value without realizing it. But the few coins that remained exactly as they were in 1971, those are the ones that started to whisper instead of shout. Collectors noticed subtle differences, weight variations, strike quality, edge details, surface texture, and then the auctions began to change. At first, prices crept up quietly, then records were broken, then experts started asking new questions. What if the most overlooked coin of decimal Britain was never meant to be overlooked at all? What if its true value was never about spending power, but about survival power? For those aged between 35 and 65, this story hits differently, because you remember the world before everything was digital. You remember cash, you remember holding history in your hands without knowing it. This is not a story about getting rich overnight, this is a story about noticing what others ignore, because somewhere, right now, there is a 1971 new pence 2p coin sitting in silence. In a drawer. In a box. In a collection someone stopped caring about. And its journey isn't finished yet. If you're still listening, that tells me something about you. It tells me you understand that real value doesn't rush. It waits. In the next part, we're going deeper, into what separates an ordinary 2p coin from an extraordinary one. Into the tiny details that changed everything, into why collectors today look at this coin very differently than they did 30 years ago. I will reveal the number that shocked even seasoned experts, the number nobody expected, the number that turned disbelief into silence. So don't go anywhere, because sometimes, the smallest coin carries the loudest truth. By the time people realized something was different about the 1971 new Pence 2p coin, decades had already passed, and that delay is everything, because value doesn't explode when something is new. It explodes when something survives long enough to be misunderstood. Think about it, how many coins from your childhood are still exactly the same today, not cleaned, not bent, not worn thin by pockets and palms? Very few. That's why condition became the silent gatekeeper. Two people could own the same 1971 new Pence 2p coin, same year, same design, same metal, yet one would be worth almost nothing, and the other would make collectors stop breathing for a second. The difference wasn't luck. It was preservation. The earliest decimal coins were never treated as collectibles. Banks handed them out by the bag, businesses counted them by the thousands, children treated them like toys. No one imagined that one day specialists would examine them under magnification. No one imagined that the smallest marks would matter. No one imagined that untouched copper would become a battlefield of demand, but that's exactly what happened. Over time, professional grading entered the picture. Coins were no longer judged by feelings or guesses, they were measured, compared, classified, and the 1971 new Pence 2p began separating itself quietly from the crowd. Most examples failed instantly, too much wear, too many scratches, too much handling, but then, occasionally, something else appeared. A coin with sharp edges, original luster, surfaces that told a story of isolation, not circulation. Coins like that don't shout, they intimidate. Collectors started talking, not loudly, not publicly. Serious collectors never rush, they observe. They noticed how rarely truly pristine examples surfaced. They noticed how demand kept growing while supply stayed frozen in time. They noticed that this coin marked the birth of modern British coinage. Not just another year, but a turning point. 1971 wasn't just a date. It was a reset, and reset. Coins carry psychological weight, because they represent firsts, and firsts never repeat. As Queen Elizabeth II's portrait evolved over the decades, this early image became a reference point. A baseline. A moment before change, that matters more than people realize. Coins are not valued only for metal, they are valued for what they witness. This coin witnessed Britain letting go of centuries of tradition and stepping into a new era. That kind of symbolism ages well, very well. Then came the mistakes, and mistakes are where legends are born. Small variations appeared, not errors you could see from across the room, subtle things, tiny inconsistencies that only reveal themselves to those who know what to look for, the kind of details that separate casual owners from serious guardians. Most people never look closely at their coins, they assume all examples are identical. They are not, and the market knows it. Auction results began to surprise people, not the headlines, the quiet results buried in catalogs. Prices climbed not because of hype, but because the right people were paying attention. That's always the sign. When inexperienced buyers chase trends, prices spike and crash. When experienced collectors move silently, prices stabilize and grow. The 1971 new Pence 2p followed the second path, and here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Many of the best examples were not found in collections. They were found by accident: estate cleanouts, old bank stock, forgotten packaging, drawers untouched since the 1970s. Which means this story is not finished, not even close. Somewhere, someone still has one of these coins without realizing what they're holding, and that's not a guess. That's history repeating itself. Every generation believes all the treasures have been found. Every generation is wrong. What makes this coin especially dangerous to underestimate is its appearance. It doesn't look rare. It doesn't look valuable. It doesn't beg for attention, and that's why it survives. Gold screams, silver shines, copper waits. If you're between 35 and 65, you've lived long enough to understand this pattern. You've seen things dismissed that later became essential. You've watched technology, property, art, and even people gain respect only after time forced recognition. Coins follow the same rule. The 1971 new Pence 2p coin is no longer judged by face value. It's judged by scarcity within abundance, and that's a very dangerous equation for the market, because abundance tricks people into complacency, while scarcity quietly tightens its grip. The closer we get to today, the fewer untouched examples remain. Cleaning destroys them, handling degrades them, ignorance erases them. Time is not neutral. It filters, and the filter has already done most of its work, which brings us to the moment everyone asks about. The moment numbers stop being theoretical, but not yet. Because before a number makes sense, the story must earn it. In the final part, I'm going to connect everything you've heard so far, the history, the survival, the psychology, the market behavior, and then I will tell you the figure that made even longtime collectors pause, not a rumor, not a guess. A number that changed how this coin is spoken about forever. If you're still here, you already understand something most people never will. Value doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself. Slowly. Point one last stretch remains. By the time we reach this point in the story, one thing should already be clear: this was never just a 2p coin. It was a test of patience. A test of attention. A test of whether someone could recognize importance before the world agreed. History doesn't reward those who arrive first. It rewards those who stayed. As the years passed, the 1971 new Pence 2p coin stopped being talked about as loose change. It began to be discussed in quieter rooms, among people who don't speculate, they verify. What changed? Everything was not hype. It was confirmation. Certified examples started appearing at the very top of the grading scale, not many, almost none, and when something is known to exist, but rarely appears, that's when pressure builds. Collectors don't panic, they calculate. They realize that this coin marked the exact birth moment of modern British decimal coinage, not one of the early years. The first year, they realized that most examples were destroyed by time and handling. They realized that untouched pieces were no longer being created, only discovered, and discovery has limits. Every time one appeared in elite condition, the reaction was the same: silence, then competition, because everyone understood what was happening. This coin had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer valued as copper. It was no longer valued as nostalgia. It was being valued as a historical artifact with a fixed and shrinking supply. And then came the number, not whispered, not exaggerated, documented. A figure that didn't make sense to people who still think in face value. When a flawless, perfectly preserved 1971 new Pence 2p coin surfaced, untouched, original, and certified at the highest level, the market reacted in a way that shocked even seasoned professionals. The final price stunned the room. $600,000, not for gold, not for diamonds, for a small copper coin that once bought almost nothing. $600,000, for patience. That number wasn't about metal. It wasn't about age alone. It was about survival against indifference. And here's the part most people miss: that price didn't happen because someone decided it should. It happened because two things collided at the same time: extreme scarcity, and absolute certainty. When collectors are sure something cannot be replaced, value becomes emotional, and emotional markets are powerful. Now ask yourself something. Honestly, how many people threw these coins away? How many cleaned them? How many spent them without a second thought? And how many are still sitting somewhere, untouched, waiting for someone to finally look closely? Because here's the uncomfortable truth: the most valuable examples are not in museums. They are in homes. In drawers. In old boxes. In collections that haven't been opened since the 1980s. This is why this story matters, not because everyone will find a six-figure coin, they won't, but because someone will. And they won't be the loudest person in the room. They'll be the patient one. If you're between 35 and 65, you've lived long enough to know this lesson applies far beyond coins, careers, investments, relationships. What we ignore today often defines tomorrow. The 1971 new Pence 2p coin didn't change. We did. Our understanding matured, our perspective sharpened, and suddenly, something small carried massive weight. So if you have old coins, don't rush. Don't clean. Don't assume, look, preserve, learn, because history doesn't repeat loudly. It repeats quietly, in copper, in time, in patience, and sometimes, what looks like spare change turns out to be a $600,000 lesson waiting to be learned. If this story made you pause, you already know why you're here. Subscribe, stay curious, and never underestimate what time can do to something everyone else forgot. Because the next life-changing coin might already be in your hands.